Good afternoon and welcome to Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, Luann Stacy, and today on our talk show, it's MCK Friday, and I'm joined by the Grand Chief Joe Norton. Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Oh,
Busy?
not too bad. Quite busy.
It's been very busy. You've had quite a busy week, actually, a few weeks, lots of meetings. And I guess I'll ask a little bit about your meeting with the Mayor of Chateauguay. I like the idea of being close, and what are some of the issues that were talked about, and how do you think that went?
Well, that went quite well in terms of content, but in terms of where it's going to go in the future is another question. I think one of the main issues that came up was the fact that right at the end of OCR, there's a proposed housing development on a certain piece of property that is adjacent to land that was returned to Kahnawake recently as part of the settlement for the 700 acres. And this is it's interesting because there's a 500 unit housing development that's been proposed over a number of years. The private contractor that has ownership of the land, and we're sort of in the way, if you want to look at it. We're in between the development itself and the OCR as it comes out of Kahnawake, right across from the I think it's the filtration plant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's right in that general area. As you're leaving Kahnawake, it's on the left-hand side.
Oh, okay.
So there's more talk that needs to happen there. I guess in relation to what is our plans for the utilization of the property, because it fronts right on the old Chateauguay Road. So that's an issue that has to be addressed in one way or another. What is our plans? There's also the actually on the OCR when it goes over the Chateauguay River, the water, the bridge.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be, I think, a raising and a widening or a shrinking of the bridge, because formerly it was supposed to be for Highway 30, way back when, almost 40 years ago. The original intent was to come down Mercier Bridge, where the arena is now, to go direct straight into Chateauguay. So it would have meant us giving up lands, private properties, all
a
of
lot
that.
more land than when we did where it went.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the crossing that strange area where it's wide,
Yeah.
and it goes over the bridge. Well, that was the original intent. They were anticipating that, so they built that bridge. But now they don't need it, so they got to reconfigure it. The CSX line, the railway tracks, the old rail line that's been shut down for I don't know how many years now, and there's an interest for Chateauguay in terms of there's an old railway bridge that goes over the Chateauguay River.
Yeah.
And the hovercraft that comes in every year during spring breakup, when the ice, it can only go so far. It can't go past that bridge. It's too low. So what they're asking is, and they know we're interested in reacquiring all of that property, if you want to call it that, from CSX, and they're willing to collaborate with us because it helps them if they can get the official shutdown by CSX, the return of the land to Kahnawake. It helps them because they in turn can take down the bridge itself to be able to travel, up the river, so to speak,
right,
with their hovercraft during ice breaking operations. So, and we talked in general just about traffic issues, and that's one issue I raised. I said, if you're going to build 500 homes, off the OCR, I said, how many people is that? Three per home, and if you do the math, that's a lot of people. And I'm sure a lot of those people are going to be working in the city. And where do you think they're going to go?
OCR.
OCR.
Right.
So we brought that up, and they hadn't thought about that, so they weren't clear. So there's more that needs to be discussed on that particular issue.
But do you think as a first meeting it was good, to start a dialogue? I'm not sure what our community's relationship has been with our neighbors in the past. So just,
Well, in the past, even when I called for a boycott regarding the former mayor, people continue to go to Chateauguay. There's relationships there, friendships. We even have people living there,
Yeah.
families and friends and all of that. So it continued to a certain degree. That didn't break down. Of course, the merchants weren't happy in Chateauguay. And since then, things have gotten back to almost normalization. And hopefully it'll get even better after this, because in our brief discussion that we had on, and I even forget what day that was, Wednesday, I think, there is a definite need to have cooperation between the two communities. In one instance, the train,
Yeah.
the reestablishment of a station here and a stop here for to be able to pick people up, bring them into the city, because the traffic conditions are not going to improve.
No.
As things go along over the next at least 4.5 years. So it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. And in having cooperation between having a bus that people can get on in Chateauguay, bus themselves over to the Adirondack Junction, and be able to get on a train there is going to relieve a lot of traffic flow. And the belief is a lot of people are going to use the.
I think even locally, a lot of people would do it.
Too,
yeah,
also,
we have students who don't have vehicles, and it's.
I think the problem has been over the years, and I know Chief Carl Horn and I had addressed this with the powers that be, the officials responsible. I can't even think of their name right now. ATM or AT something. They the first year is okay, but then subsequent years after that, it's a certain amount of money has to be paid to them. It's like in any municipality, a tax has to be paid for a train stop. But the mayor of Chateauguay seems to think that, it's not a major issue. He said they're adding one train, they're adding one car. He says, so why are you going to pay a couple $100,000 for that?
Yeah, really.
So he says, we'll work together on making sure that doesn't happen. Where we're going to have to shell out money for something like that. So it's an ongoing, in the works kind of thing, and we hope to see something in the new year. There was one other issue, a bit of a touchy one. Chateauguay has been talking about doing a sewage dump, a 5-day sewage dump to do a bypass for the cleaning out of their regular system. It seems like there's rocks and trees and all kinds of stuff that are blocking. So apparently there's a creek there in which they're proposing to dump sewage in, which goes into the river, and then from the river, the Chateauguay River, then goes into the St. Lawrence River, and we're concerned about the effects of that on Kahnawake. There's still testing that has to be done. There's still inconclusive what the effects will be. So they've agreed. They brought in their top engineering people, and we sat with them. We spoke briefly, and they said that they haven't made a decision, so they don't really know yet at this point. And in the new year, there's going to be a collaborative working relationship with Kahnawake, to find, if there is a solution, then let's find a solution other than straightforward. It's not like the city of Montreal, where it was a couple of billion liters, but it's going to have its effects, and we're concerned about the recreation bay and things of that nature. So they're quite cooperative about it. They have to be, because we live side by side, and we don't want you dumping on us.
You're listening to K103 Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow. My guest in studio is Grand Chief Joe Norton, and this is MCK Friday. Welcome back to K103 Tetewathá, Partyline Talk Show. I'm your host, Len Stacy, and today is MCK Friday. Before we start, I have a message from Holly McCumber. A reminder to the community, don't be parked outside buildings and leaving your car idle. That creates a lot of toxic fumes that end up in the environment for nothing. And today is not even a really cold day regardless, and she told me that regardless, don't send it. But please, be careful with your vehicles, because it's not good. It's not a good practice. There you go, Holly. I did your.
And I'm guilty because before I came here, I stopped at my house and I left the car.
It wasn't intended. We were outside a
community
building,
off,
we were outside a community building, and there was a lot of cars that were idling.
I can imagine,
so it kind of smelt out just in the area. Yeah. So I guess when I was speaking to Joe Delaron, we were talking about trying to do a little bit of a year in review, and it's been for yourself. It's not even 6 months. So we'll go on what are some of the things and some of the issues that have been the top thing. So I guess one of the probably biggest things right now is the S3. Let's talk a little bit about that and the impact here on the community. Yeah,
S3 is a major issue that all people in Kahnawake, those that are considered to be registered community members under the Kahnawake registration system should be very aware, and if you're not, then make yourself aware of what these means, what the proposed what this law that has been passed by Canada means to us from a very in a very detrimental way. Without going into great detail, because there's plenty of opportunity recently as this week, public meetings that are held, kiosks and things of that nature with handouts and information for people to look at, and the aspect of having Canada register people who've been far removed in terms of fifth generation, fourth generation, to be able to be recognized, because of the court case, Deschanel, and then subsequently after that, the passing of the law, the hearings that were held in, at the Senate. It makes it very essential that we all understand the situation, and that literally thousands and thousands of people are now eligible to become Mohawks of Kahnawake. Not Kahnawake, but Mohawks of Kahnawake. Let's make a difference between the two. There's a registry list in Ottawa, and I'm sure people have been hearing this over and over and over again. But we're going to continue to push this over and over and over again. And people of that nature who don't know anything about us, have not struggled alongside of us, with us in terms of trying to continue to maintain the uniqueness of who we are, our lands, our language, our culture, now have accessibility through this process to be able to say, well, I'm attached to Kahnawake. I can go there. At least I can attempt to go there, and get whatever I'm entitled to, and even entitled to purchase of lands. And it doesn't even have to happen here. It can happen outside of Kahnawake, because someone has a status ban card under the registry system of Ottawa, and they can come and they can find somebody who's willing, to sell property. And there's, I would say, people out there, probably in those thousands of people, between 35 to 65,000 possible returnees, if you want to call it that, or registrants. There are probably people out there who have money, very influential, so they can, they can flash the dollar and say, you're willing to sell. And we want our people to stand fast, be solid about it, and not be able to be enticed by that. because it's important. It's important to the future.
Do you think this is going the total opposite of the Indian Act, where they cut people off, cut women off, did that, and then now they're going to water it down by adding anybody who they want to add? Is that like the same kind of...
Well, as a result of that and challenges along the way over the last 15, 20 years, and court cases, now the government says, well, we're going to reverse this discrimination, and we're going to recognize all those that have been discriminated against, particularly females. But what's happened though is, since that time, there's been a lot of our people going back, 4 generations, 5 generations who've married outside of the community, and now have children who in turn have married outside of the community, who had children who in turn, and so on and so forth, have married outside of the community. And suddenly, the light went on, and the government saw fit to strike those sections from the Indian Act that were discriminatory against women, which I can agree to.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
No.
Let's not get this wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that there's so many who have married outside, and their children have married others, and it's gone on and on, that now we're at a stage where the government's saying, well, in reversing that and striking these discriminatory sections, we also now attach, because of a court decision, the generations after, So it does create a major problem for us, and it flies completely in the face of what we've been attempting to do through our own Kanien'kehá:ka registry system, So what do? So we have to stand fast on our particular position. We can't allow people to be coming into the community. We have to, and we've been very insistent with Canada, with ministers, with the government itself, even the Prime Minister saying, you've done this in good faith or whatever, but what you've done now is you've created this other mess.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, So that's been coming since last year or 2 years now.
Yeah.
Gus Nahaway and I were at the hearings in which we sat, and we explained Kahnawaka's situation, and we had the Native Women's Association of Canada there and other interests, and we said, we've got nothing against these women. If you want to reinstate them, that's fine, but we have a different set of circumstances that we're concerned about.
And I think the thing is we're limited in the resources we get. We're struggling in almost every area. People are looking for funding, no matter what sector it is within the community. Nobody's at full functioning capacity. And we know that through fundraising. We know through other kinds of ventures that have been to put extra dollars within the community. I guess not putting the dollars attached to it really, to me, again, stated that, they had no intention of,
Yeah, and we should have learned.
Right.
And they should have learned from 1985.
Yeah.
When they amended the law at that time again to further enhance the circumstances of people in that situation when they passed Bill C-31. And we asked at that time, they said, well, if you're going to do that, are you going to create bigger territories?
Right.
Are you going to bring in more money, and are you going to provide more resources, for our people if you're going to do that?
Right.
And we asked that question, in a public forum. I believe it was in Ottawa, one of the assemblies, to the minister at that time, and said, "Are you going to do that for the sake of the other First Nations across Canada?" Not so much for ourselves, because we are against that, And the response was, yes, we will be appropriating more lands, more monies and all that. And that never happened.
No.
So, 1985, whatever, 30 some odd years ago, they didn't do it then. And what makes us think they're going to do it now? And it's even more people that we're talking
Absolutely.
about. It's not just a handful of people, it's more.
So let me ask a question. I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I wanted to ask a question. What can the community do to make sure that we're supporting against this S3?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things is, first and foremost, talk to your children. Talk to your brothers, your sisters, and all those still of that age that are still single and don't have no attachments yet, Be very wary of the things that are going on in the community itself. I've really pushed for and hoping that in the coming year, and I know it's going to happen, is also reinstatements, because we've got a lot of people in waiting.
And who should be here?
Who should be here, should be on the list. We've got to start to show people that we're proactive.
Yeah.
We're going to do things. I've said, let's start sending out the notices to people who have no business here. Let's reactivate that, because we've been dormant. Yeah. We've been dormant from last spring. Nothing has really happened. It's been quiet. So we've got to reactivate that to show to Canada, that we mean business. We're going to support the law and the things that we've established. Also, since the Miller Horn case, there's been in March of this past winter, a lot of things have happened, or there are things that have happened that really point out that we've got to get our act together and start moving on this, because we can't just
sit and wait.
No.
Okay.
Canada's active. Canada's moving. Yeah. So we better start moving.
I just have a comment from a listener, and it's just a comment. Calling S3 ethnic cleansing, and says it leads to civil war if we don't do something. And I don't know if we want to go that far, but maybe eventually we may have to.
Well, it's certainly going to lead to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we and it is ethnic cleansing. That's what it is, really, in reality.
Absolutely.
And long term, they have could add it to their long-term plan.
Absolutely, because that's what it seems like. If you've been following the Indian Act and been following all their new, Justin Trudeau says it's going to be this, we're going to give that back, and so far nothing, since the election. You're listening to K103.7's Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow. Today is MCK Friday, and I'm joined by the Grand Chief, Joe Norton. Can we move on? I wanted to talk. I have a listener who asked the question. They wanted to know if you could briefly describe the financial agreement between MCK and the casino part of Playground that it opened yesterday, and what the community can expect from that.
Yeah, well, we do have a very, and we've explained this. It's open. It's nothing. It's nothing where we haven't explained to the community. The offer that was brought forth by the operators of the electronic gaming devices. And it's a completely separate operation from Playground. Okay. They have offered, and we've accepted, that they'll pay $1 million a year, every year for 3 years. This is a pilot project, and there's I forget what the figures are, but they have to pay for a license to the KGC, and then promote as much as possible the employment factor, employment side of it, get as many people as possible from Kahnawake to work in the facility to make it successful. So it's both to Kahnawake's benefit as well as the operators of the new facility to be successful, because we'll be able to see a return on their success is our success. So it is a partnership in that sense.
Okay, question. $1 million per year was for 200 machines. They have over 3. Why wasn't the amount to give back increased?
No, it wasn't based on the number of machines. It was just based on the fact that, this is what they will give back.
I had seen a report, and it said it could even be more, depending on what they're...
That's exactly what it is. If after 3 years it's a success, then we can start looking at what the amount that they will change, for sure.
So I guess my question is what will that money go into, and what is being looked at to be funded?
There is no decision that's been made yet.
Okay.
but that could go into all the different things that we're now funding. It's in addition to that, it's another $1 million a year that can help, be it in recreation, be it in education, be it wherever the necessity is.
Okay. I think that's it on that topic. I did get a question from a listener, and I guess we can talk about it because I think it had a big impact on the community. And I'm talking about what happened in housing. Mm-hmm. And that to me was a big one that kind of rocked the community. And just some comments and some thoughts that you would have on this issue.
Well, it definitely rocked me. Simply because 40 some odd years ago, when I first was elected to the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, I helped initiate the housing program.
That's right.
It was already in existence to some degree through CMHC. But then we said, let's move on to greater things, the row housing, and things of that nature. So, and we began to look at, mortgages internally with our community. And it started off small and gradually grew. The faces changed and so on and so forth. So it is. I guess it was shocking and disappointing to see what had happened. Because of the fact that, the criminal side of it hasn't been proven yet. So
okay.
I'm not into...
So you can't...
I don't really want to say anything
right.
at this point.
Right.
I don't want to... but the evidence is there, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And the numbers so far are there. I don't know if that's going to change. The disappointing part, too, is people who were supposed to be responsible for overseeing this. How did it get by? How did it happen? And so you sit there and you wonder and you scratch your head. I thought we had an infallible system in place that this couldn't happen, But it sent a clear message that it can happen. So we better be very vigilant. And it's caused internally a relook at everything, not only in that sector, but all sectors. Change, the methods about how you're going to give responsibilities to managers, directors, and how in turn they fulfill their obligations.
And I guess the sad part is housing's always been such a big issue because of the needs and demands. We've had some people talk about it. The late Martin LeBourne and Bobby Patton had come in and talked about how it's pretty bad in our community that people are looking. Many people have to live outside the community because there really isn't any places for people to live.
Yeah, and you know what? You got to look at it from a perspective in terms of saying, what do we do? Do we go back to the old style of what they call welfare housing?
Right.
And I don't think that's the answer. Because homes were built and they were not quality, but they were livable.
Right.
And they lasted only so many years, and they had to be repaired, and things of that nature. Some people took very good care of their homes, others didn't, and there was no incentive there, to be a homeowner.
Right.
Because they said, well, it's not my house, and things of that nature. So today, since that time, and fast forwarding to over the course of the last 25 years, there's been an attempt to really get people to be homeowners.
Yes.
Manage your home and take care of it. And you can't paint everybody with the same brush, okay? So there are those who are able to accomplish, and it all depends on their own initiatives, whether they improve in their life in terms of being employed, and doing things that are going to make their life better for their children, themselves, and then having a home that's presentable, that they want.
Yeah. You're listening to K103.7 Tetewathá. Welcome back to Tetewathá Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, Len Stacy, and today is MCK Friday, and I'm joined by the Grand Chief Joe Norton, and we're doing a little bit of a year in review, but not necessarily a year. It's probably like 5-6 months, but there's been so much going on within the community, so it's been very, very busy. And I guess one of the other hot topics, and it's still a very hot topic, is the issue of cannabis. So if you can just comment a little bit on...
Well, as I said recently, thank you, Canada, for plunking this problem on us by passing a law that has created the opportunity for people to do whatever the law permits in terms of the sale, the manufacture, the sale, and whatever it may be of cannabis. So we've been struggling with this, and I say struggle. It hasn't been a smooth ride for about I'd say 2 years now since we became aware of, and we've been aware longer than that, because that was one of the first things Trudeau had promised when he was campaigning, that he was going to legalize marijuana. So since then, it's grown, gradually, and it became went ahead full steam this past October. And as we know, not everybody in the community is in favor. As we know that there's been a zero tolerance. It goes all the way back to '88 for drugs of any kind. But I think the distinction that's difficult for people to grasp at this time is, and we like to use other examples such as alcohol. Alcohol at one time was illegal in Kahnawake, or at least the
front end of it.
Yeah, the different law enforcements that were here, periodically, like RCMP and all that. And there's stories about what happened historically. The Legion, the Knights of Columbus, and things of the nature. As the organizations grew and the use of alcohol became more predominant, and back then the debates that went on over that, because I can remember those very clearly.
Yeah.
That has now, you use that as an example. Now you look at today, and suddenly marijuana or cannabis has become legitimized.
Yeah.
So does that mean then internally here we say it's not legal? And prior to that, there were community members who were using for medical purposes by prescription, and people forget about that, or people want to ignore that and say, no, it's never, we shouldn't be using it. So the medical part of it has already been in existence for a long time, and we know about that. Now we get into this different side of it, and the introduction of a law in the community that does one of two things. One is it recognizes it as the product, as I shouldn't say product, but cannabis as being legal, and here are the laws to control it.
Right.
Here are the laws to and a policy that develops as a result of that. And there's another side to it too, which looks at the commercialization side of it. Can we have a business on it? So that's where the debate really begins.
Yeah, because I don't think very many people have been against the law part of it. I haven't heard that from any of the sectors, to be honest. And we've been talking to people. To me, it's the commercialization of it, and to me that opens very much a similar thing to the tobacco industry. And I think people have paralleled that part to it. And again, this is the government's way of saying we're going to legalize it, but they didn't put any parameters. Now they're running around trying to put parameters around what this law could look like.
So now, as much as possible, what we've proposed is to put controls on that, so we don't find ourselves in the same circumstance as tobacco. It ran rampant. People had their, and it was either a mistake or it was something that we couldn't control no matter what, because I was involved in all of that too.
Right.
When it first began. And it was difficult, to try and do anything with people who said, this is our right, stay out of it. But if I get in trouble, you better be there for me,
Right.
And the only thing we could do was we could say that it was legal in Kahnawake, because it was tied to, our rights at the border too.
Right.
Because that's where a lot of the product came from across the border. And we said it's not smuggling, it's not illegal, it's not criminal, it's not this, not that. But as time went on, it became more and more difficult to argue that, because a lot of criminal elements got involved.
Yeah.
Both here in the community as well as elsewhere. So it made it more difficult for us to stand up for that and say that was legitimate. So all we could do was continue to hold the line, but we couldn't do anything if you were caught outside of Kahnawake transporting or whatever it is. And a lot of people were caught, and millions of dollars in fines were paid.
Yeah.
Right up to this day, it's still an issue. So we don't want to see the same things happen with cannabis. So there's a certain amount of controls and a law that we put in place, but then there's the willingness and the cooperation of people with the people of Kahnawake to work within the framework.
Yeah.
And that's where the difficulty begins, because you have a small group of people in the community who want to go off on their own.
Yeah.
They've already demonstrated that, by being very, very disruptive and attacking and saying things that very unbecoming of anybody in a public forum.
And then you have another group of people who are totally against that part.
Yeah.
You have some of the longhouses who've made statements. You have community members reminding the community it's zero tolerance.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what the answers are, but at some point in time, people need to sit down and talk about it and what's in the best interest of the community.
In there is the fact that in September, I believe, of 2017, we had, or was it 2016? We had set a moratorium in place saying, until such time as we have a law in place, till such time we're fully functional, there will be no operations, there will be no commercial, and inside of that, there's been raids and people who have been arrested and things of that nature to show that we mean business. We are going to enforce what we have to do, even though we didn't have a law in place. But we had to use the criminal code and federal law of Canada, on that particular issue. People criticize us for it, and maybe rightfully so. But at the same time, though, we had to have something. We couldn't just sit back and allow things to grow. And people were pointing the finger west of us to Tyendinaga, one of our sister Mohawk communities, in which things have gone rampant. 33 outlets that are operating now, free and clear. I was invited to Calgary last month to a cannabis conference. I was one of the speakers that sat on a panel. And prior to my getting up there was a young man from Tyendinaga who stood up, in ribbon shirt and all, and proudly boasted that he had 5 operations going there, saying that we had beaten the band council to the punch. There's nothing they can do about it, and that but he also said if anything happens, they have to be there to protect us. So it's almost like I'm gonna have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Everything, and it's an example of what can happen. So there has to be something in place to prevent that. And yes, it was a new avenue for us, something we had never done before. On that specific product, but the principles are the same in terms of alcohol, in terms of the
tobacco.
It's
the
gaming.
Same. Yeah,
it's the same
thing. Yeah,
the same thing. Only this is much more difficult. Because you got federal involvement and province now knocking at the door, and them trying to enforce their
taxation.
Their situation.
Yeah.
And we're being accused of following that law, and that what good is our law if you already have something out there? But there are components that we need to put in place. We need to have a cannabis control board. We need to have I think we're calling it the sort of the health and safety side of things. Another board that needs to go in place to oversee all of that. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We want to make sure that if there's any product that's going to come in here, that it's safe. It's safe for anybody. Although people will counteract that by saying, cannabis is not safe. Period.
Right. Right.
No matter how much you oversee it. And then of course there's still the I would say the unanswered question by community members to say no.
Yes.
That's unanswered yet.
Yeah.
And there's still need to go through a number of steps to see where all of that is going to settle. So it's there's many unanswered questions at this point, and community members are asking, and we have to be able to start working, with the community. But we also have to be able to understand too. People have to understand you can't have public gatherings where there's going to be disruptive people coming in there, threatening. It's one thing to stand up and say, challenge, I'm against this, I'm against that, or I'm for this. I don't want you to try and control me. No laws, nothing like that is applicable to me. I'm free, I'm clear, I'm this and that. It's one thing to say that, but it's another thing then to be very downright nasty.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
And I'm glad you're bringing this up, because one of the things, an observation that I've made, and I know some other people have made, it seems like in the last little while, people have become very outspoken and very demanding in terms of leadership. And how, as leadership, how do you go about being able to get the community involved and at the same time make decisions? Because I think it's a little bit different if we went back 20 years or 30 years, and you and I both can go back that long, and I've always been involved, but it's come to a point where it's not healthy. It's not a good way of operating. It's not a good way. And as leadership, it's changed. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that.
It is changed substantially to 40 years ago.
Yes.
Okay, when I was first elected, 1978, and still at that time we had quite a number of. I was still an iron worker at that time, so I wasn't around here. I was gone, and we would meet on the weekends on Saturdays. That's when we met as a council, and then we'd also have our monthly meetings, because it was monthly.
Yeah.
We'd have them on the weekends too, and that was to accommodate not only the chiefs who were elected, but also community members, because a lot of people were away. They weren't here. And so it was very difficult, in the sense that the information wasn't always fresh to both the community as well as to the people who were responsible, the band council, as we were called back then. And so times have progressed, time have changed, if you will, and things have happened that people demanded in the community. The takeover of education, survival school, and it just goes on and on and on. The list is there; it's always progressive. So there had to be more stay-at-home council members, to help, help oversee those kinds of movements, and of course, you had a changeover in our law enforcement agency, and that became a very major issue over time. And I, off the top of my head, I can't remember all of the things that happened, but that's basically the start. It was like a revolution, and you had to be part of it if you were going to be in leadership. It was difficult to make that transition, because before people were stood firm in their in the way they saw things, but they saw progression, they saw things happening to make things work. And I won't say there was a lull or anything like that. It was always a growth. In 1990 came along, another time period in which this community had to really move and work together to make things happen and to come out of that safe.
Yeah.
Even 1987, the infamous ice storm.
Yeah.
That put this community, put us to the test, and people worked together and make sure we came out of that. So I've seen those things happening. This is not just somebody else telling me. I was right there. I was part of it. And and over that time, in the some of the things we had no control over, other things we did it ourselves. Kind of thing. We couldn't do anything about Mother Nature. That was it. So we had to do the best that we could, and we did well. We did quite well. So and then there was turn inwardly. A lot of things happened that created turmoil. the dissatisfaction from the young people about what was happening, at the we'll call it the level of the political level.
Yeah.
And the education system and the Mohawk Council being at odds with each other. And today, I think it's just another phase, and I'm not taking it lightly.
No.
Another phase in the demands of the community to move to another level, to be able to do things from an economic point of view, from a social point of view. And, they're looking at the governance. They want changes in the way we do things. There's a feeling that perhaps we are not open enough. We are not close enough to the community.
Transparent has been words I've heard.
But I mean, if you look at it, we put out information there on a daily basis. All the things that we do, we send out, electronically, and hopefully people, everybody has a computer, everybody has one of those phones that they can pick things up on. So I don't know at this point. As a matter of fact, we had a discussion just this week on that very topic, and saying how much more can we do in terms of getting to the community.
Yeah.
And I think in the new year, I know in the new year we're going to be coming forth with a number of scenarios. Do we meet on the weekends again?
Yeah.
During the day.
Yeah.
Rather than at night, midweek, change a lot of the formats in terms of going to meetings in which we break up and we're in circles, things which have been tried before.
But maybe it's time to resurrect them, right?
Yeah. In order to have this, and it's not to take away the opportunity for people to speak. And we could have those meetings again, but you don't want to create platforms where somebody gets up there and they just,
Because you need to have good dialogue and where this community
there
wants to go.
There has to be respect for each other. It's not just respect for the council, but it's respect for
community members,
somebody sitting beside you who may have an opposite opinion and would like to stand up, would like to talk, who would like to be able to express their point of view, whether they're for or against or supportive of. And those kinds of gatherings and forum aren't necessarily decision making, but the information is taken, it's brought together and given back to the community. And, do you want to do this?
Okay.
In other words, so the opportunity is there to hopefully drastically change the way the leadership in the community and the people work together,
Okay.
or not work together,
right?
In some instances.
So we got something to look forward in the new year, 2019.
Yeah.
Any last minute words? We're at the end, so.
No, just wish everybody a Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and be safe.
Okay. Thank you, Grand Chief Joe Norton. Coming up on Monday, Tetewathá, Zuze McGregor, Leo Daiba will be in, and we're going to be talking holiday season retro, what used to happen in Kahnawake, and I look forward to that because those guys are just full of knowledge. Up next with the 1 o'clock news is Kathleen Speckard. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Onigiwahi.
Yeah.